There is a handbag that looks exactly like a trash bag. It is made of crinkled leather, colored to resemble garbage, and it retails for $1,790. Balenciaga released it in 2022 and called it the trash pouch. Before that, there was a pair of sneakers deliberately covered in dirt and holes, sold for nearly $2,000 and marketed as fully destroyed. Celine sold a plastic shopping bag that looked indistinguishable from something you would get at a corner store for over $600. This is the aesthetic of ultra-luxury in the 21st century, expensive things that look cheap on purpose. But here's what is strange. The actual billionaires, the ones with private jets and Swiss bank accounts, do not wear any of it. You will not see Jeff Bezos in a destroyed hoodie. You will not catch Bernard Arnault carrying a trash pouch. The wealthiest people on earth have quietly walked away from loud luxury altogether, and the story of why reveals something uncomfortable about what status actually means now. To understand this shift, you have to understand what luxury used to be. For most of the 20th century, luxury was about visible craftsmanship. A Rolex told the world you could afford a Rolex. A Louis Vuitton monogram bag was a billboard of success. The logo was the point. You paid for the object, but you also paid for the privilege of being seen with the object. That system worked because luxury was scarce. Only a small percentage of the global population could afford a designer handbag, so owning one automatically placed you inside an exclusive club. The monogram wasn't vanity, it was membership. Then something happened that the old luxury houses did not see coming. The middle class got rich enough to play. Between the 1990s and the 2010s, globalization and accessible luxury lines meant that almost anyone could buy into the fantasy. Monogram bags appeared on subways, at airports, in every corner of the world. Counterfeits became nearly indistinguishable from the real thing, and suddenly the logo stopped working as a status signal. When the secretary, the nurse, and the heiress all carried the same bag, the bag meant nothing. If stories like this one interest you, hit subscribe before we go any further, because what the richest people started wearing instead will completely change how you see wealth, and there's an even stranger twist coming later in the story. The luxury industry had a problem. If logos no longer signaled status, something else had to. The response came in two completely opposite directions. The first was Balenciaga's strategy. If everyone can afford to look rich, then looking rich isn't rich anymore, so they flipped it. They made luxury look ugly on purpose. They made sneakers look destroyed. They made bags look like garbage. They charged outrageous prices for items that appeared worthless because the only person who could pull that off was someone wealthy enough to be obviously undeniably in on the joke. A homeless person carrying a real trash bag is invisible. A wealthy person carrying a leather replica costing $1,700 is performing theater about their own wealth. This is what economists call a Veblen good taken to its extreme. The value comes not from quality but from the waste itself, from the conspicuous refusal to care about value. Demna Gvasalia, the creative director behind much of this movement, understood something profound about his customers. They were not buying clothes, they were buying a costume for a character called Rich Person who no longer has to try. For a certain demographic, pop stars, influencers, and newly wealthy tech workers, this worked perfectly. If you need everyone to know you have made it, nothing communicates arrival faster than wearing something that costs more than a used car and looks like literal trash. But there is a category of person this does not work for. Actual billionaires, the families with generational wealth, the quiet operators who run private equity firms and shipping empires. These people do not need to signal they have arrived because they were never going anywhere in the first place. For them, wearing destroyed Balenciaga sneakers would feel absurd. It would be like a king dressing as a peasant at a costume party. The cosplay itself would betray the insecurity underneath. So they went the other direction entirely. Quiet luxury, stealth wealth, clothing that looks unremarkable from 10 feet away but costs a fortune up close. Brunello Cucinelli cashmere that appears to be a plain beige sweater but costs over $3,000. Loro Piana jackets made from vicuna wool, spun from an animal that can only be shorn once every 3 years, selling for $20,000 and looking like something from a mid-range department store. The Row, founded by Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, produces minimalist clothing without any visible branding whatsoever. A white t-shirt for $490, a leather tote bag with no logo for $6,000. The television show Succession turned this aesthetic into a cultural moment. The Roy family, fictional billionaires based loosely on the Murdochs, wore nothing flashy. No logos, no statement pieces, just impossibly expensive basics and muted colors. The costume designer famously said, "The wealthy characters wore clothes that whispered, while the strivers and outsiders wore clothes that shouted." You could tell who belonged to the family by looking at what they refused to wear, and audiences understood immediately. Real wealth doesn't announce itself. Real wealth hides in plain sight. There's a deeper psychology at work here. For truly wealthy people, being recognized is often a liability. Kidnapping insurance exists, private security costs millions annually, a visible logo is a target, but beyond security there's the social dimension. Old money families have always looked down on new money, and the way they've distinguished themselves is through codes that cannot be bought in a single shopping trip. Knowing which tailor to use. Knowing that monograms are vulgar. Knowing that the best things are the ones no one else can identify. This is why Mark Zuckerberg wore the same gray t-shirt for years. Why Steve Jobs committed to black turtlenecks. Why Jeff Bezos, before his transformation, dressed like a slightly disheveled accountant. These men weren't saving money, they were signaling that they were above the game entirely. Caring about clothing was something other people did. The ultimate flex wasn't owning the most expensive thing in the room. It was making other people in the room worry their things weren't expensive enough. And here's where the story gets ironic. The loud luxury of Balenciaga and the rest of the streetwear explosion was never really aimed at billionaires. It was aimed at the aspirational class. These were people with enough money to spend $2,000 on sneakers, but not enough generational wealth to feel secure without validation. The truly wealthy watched this market explode and quietly exited. They bought shares in the companies perhaps, but they did not wear the product. We are now living in the aftermath of this split. On one end is anti-luxury that costs a fortune and screams for attention. On the other end is invisible luxury that costs even more and refuses to be seen. Both are expensive, both are exclusive, but only one is actually worn by the people with the most money in the world. The billionaires have decided that the best way to look rich is to look like you do not have to think about looking rich at all. When everything is a status symbol, the ultimate flex is looking like you do not care. And the punchline is that not caring has become the most expensive performance of all. So the next time you see someone carrying a trash pouch or rocking destroyed sneakers, ask yourself who the costume is really for. It is not the billionaires. They are in the corner wearing an $8,000 sweater that looks like it came from a thrift store, watching the rest of us try to figure out who is actually rich. And somewhere in that quiet calculation is the oldest rule of wealth ever written. The less you need to prove it, the more of it you have. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned today and how you plan to use it in your life. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, consider subscribing so you do not miss future videos.